All right, I'm going to get started. One fun fact I will share is today we're going to be talking about GCP and in particular about GCP cloud storage buckets, but I'll also quickly show you the equivalent from S3, and I will also show you a Firebase auth implementation that one of our users, Thomas Stadler, built. This has been our most popular topic so far by far. We got a ton of interest in this, and so we'll probably be doing it a few more times. This is our first time sharing this content, so we'd love to hear any feedback or hear questions about what else you might like to see in this realm. To get started, I'm sure most of you have seen this before, but just in case you were brand new to Dark and you decided to start with integrating with GCP, everything Dark is in the browser, and the main things that you need to know is that you're always working with major structural backend components. In particular, that's often API endpoints, data storage, and background workers or cron. The other thing to keep in mind, in particular, for what we're going to be doing today, is how we use Dark to integrate with external APIs. And so let me just make a quick API endpoint so you can see how that works. I know most of you I've seen on these calls before, and you've seen this a billion times, but there you go. You have an API endpoint up and running. And our main focus is that users should be, and developers should be able to access real data while they're working. So if I am back in Dark and I want to make a call to an external API, in this case, I'm going to call my own Dark application so we can see the whole flow happen. I can use the existing HTTP client library. So you can see here, I have HTTP client post v5. It takes the 4 parameters that I need to be able to make that request. In this case, ln15th.builddark.com/test. Any associated JSON I want to send along, and then my header and query. And you can imagine that this will be very similar to the flow we go through while we're working with GCP. But for now, you can see I press the play button, and I get a response in line depending on how my API responded. In this case, if I make that endpoint and then have it available to me and then rerun the call with it's alive, I will now get that response as my body. Yes, and it gives me the string rather than, a new UI for the chat. It gives me that response rather than the response on the error rail. And so while this is obviously a super simple example, this is the same foundation that you build on regardless of what you're integrating with from Dark, be that other cloud storage or be that an API like Slack or something else that we've talked about before. One thing I want to note that's a little bit different about integrating with GCP compared to some of the other things that we've talked about integrating with before is there would be 2 big reasons that you would want to integrate with an external cloud provider. The first, of course, is if you already have something that's built and you're just trying out Dark and you want to add a new microservice to your existing application, you want to be able to talk to the stuff you already have. I've seen people do this with GCP and with AWS. We've also had people do it with external data stores like Mongo Labs has a pretty nice API wrapper for pulling things out. The second reason you would want to go to an external cloud storage provider is if you need to do something that Dark doesn't have yet. The example we're using today for having a cloud storage bucket like S3 is one that does come up because we don't yet support binary file types in our HTTP client library, which is something that hopefully should be coming. But so if you wanted to have your users uploading a bunch of images or a bunch of MP3s or video or something like that, you would want to use another service like this. And so from that perspective, most of those things we do hope to support over time, but we really rely on REST so you can integrate out to something else so we won't be blocking you. With that note, if you do find that there's something that's still blocking you, let us know. One thing we have been considering is allowing users to potentially unblock themselves. So if you have something that, say that binary format type or something like that, that's preventing you from being able to get work done and you feel like we haven't been working on it quickly enough, let us know. We can talk a little bit more about that. Paul, my co-founder, who you heard from last week about the standards library, has been spending a lot of time in that area recently. The other thing I will note is if you have more infrastructure questions about Dark's infrastructure, we run on GKE, which is why I'm doing the demo with GCP. It's the closest to what we're using for a bunch of our things. And we run in US West is the zone that we're currently running in, which I know people ask about that a fair amount. If you're on the 7 a.m. call, you probably are not in US West at 7 a.m. Pacific. So that is that. And if you have more questions about our infrastructure, how things work, feel free to drop by our community Slack. I know I've mentioned this on previous calls too, but specifically if you have questions about something you're going to do and the performance characteristics it will have, or the amount of data you want to store, or something about your load, please come by and ask. We're happy to talk about it anytime and make sure that we're going to be able to support you effectively. I'm going to pause there. We haven't had questions yet because I think most of you have kind of been through that set of the information. So I'm going to jump straight into doing things with GCP. And again, feel free to drop questions as we go. And Victoria has also linked to the Slack in the chat in case any of you aren't there yet. So that's definitely a really easy way to talk to us. Okay, so if you've used GCP before, you've probably seen this documentation. My husband and I were joking about this yesterday because both of us were on this page yesterday for totally unrelated reasons for our jobs. There's a ton of documentation on all of the APIs that are available, but the one I wanted to start from was the authentication API. Everyone needs this right away. And I'm particularly excited because we've actually made this even easier in Dark. We've added I've mentioned before, we have our new package manager, but we have added a package specifically for Google Cloud and specifically this OAuth access token. A cool thing about these packages, you can get to them all from the sidebar now and see what they are. You can actually look at the code under the hood. And so if you would feel better for some reason about re-implementing OAuth yourself, or you just want to try it out and compare your implementation to ours, you can open this and see how everything works under the hood. You can see it takes the service account object and the scope, both of which I'll be doing, so we can start putting things in our bucket. And it uses a bunch of Dark's built-in functionality. Here's the JWT sign and encode function. I don't think this one has any of the others. But this is now available, and so you can just use it instead of having to write all of this logic yourself, because this is definitely one of the things that was most painful about the external integration, particularly to Google Cloud. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to do this in REPLs today because we don't really have any reason to put my demo GCP information on the internet. So I'm going to call this put in bucket. And just so you know, I set up a bucket ahead of time. It's called the Dark demo bucket. It's not terribly exciting. And what we're going to do is I'll just show you this too. This one is pretty locked down. I'll just flash it quickly. I just put our blob of text for the service account JSON for this account. Since I know the people on the GCP call are also probably very security minded, this is completely separate from anything that's real for Dark. This is solely so I can do these demos and show people how things are working. I suppose if you got it, you could put some stuff in my bucket. Actually, yeah, it would be much more locked down than anything else we have. So let's start from that. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to call our Google Cloud OAuth token. You can see we need that service account JSON, and then we need to specify a scope. You've probably all done this many more times than I have. But what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to grab full control, and I am going to make this changeable. So if we want to change it in the future, we can. And now all I'm going to do is, like I showed you before, making an HTTP client post. That's the same thing. This is just a wrapper that wraps HTTP client post. And when I play this, I get back my access token. One thing that's a nice pattern that you may not have used so far is I could set this to a variable as my auth response and then get the access token if I just want to like that. But if instead I just want to, I can just pipe into an anonymous function and then get my access token. And so then I have that available to me. I did not actually set it equal to a token. One of the areas we are still hammering out bugs on is where those pipes appear, which I know all of you have seen before. But if you find any particularly like that, I'll make a note of that one so we can fix it. But there you go. Now we have our token, which is available to us. And so we're going to be able to use it when we talk to our other APIs. And so when we go into, I don't think there's anything else too exciting in here, but this is the page that shows all of the URLs where you can pull all the scopes. And then when we move to specifically the API for inserting things into the bucket, we can see here that we're specifically going to be making a post request to this URL, which I'm going to grab. And I told you before, my bucket is named dark demo bucket. And then URL equals one thing I really wish we had nicer for would be string interpolation, because I spend a lot of time doing this. And I would bet that you do too. And so then we have that URL, and then we're going to make an HTTP client post to that URL. And we want to put some a file into this. So let's give ourselves a file name, and we'll just call it hello world. And let's give it a body, and let's give it, I don't know, content hello from Darkling GCP chat. And let's give it a timestamp. Now. I can run that so you can see that. That was fun and interactive. And let's see what else this takes. We gave it our bucket already. We're going to give it an upload type. So we're going to give it an upload type media bucket. Bucket, I believe we also need, I think. Name, yes, we have our file name. File name, and then our header, clear token, and token, and then let's merge that with JSON. And then our body, we can use what we have already, and then I'm just gonna make it JSON. I think this will work. So you can see here, that's what that looks like once we formatted it. Give that a go. And it appears to have succeeded. And you can see we get back all of the information that we have available. And so that's pretty much all it takes to just put something into a bucket. So if you have an existing bucket, I'll show you how we can get this back out of the bucket. You would use a really similar process for working with any of the other GCP APIs, especially for the first part where you're getting started. I think really a lot of why we got so many questions about this partially was the auth-flow. The auth-flow is definitely a little bit of a pain. And so I'm hoping this package manager function will make this a little bit easier for people. But now that we've put it in a bucket, let's get things back out of our bucket. And then I'll show you a couple other things too. Haven't been seeing too many questions so far today, but if you have questions, again, feel free to drop them in the chat. And this time we can get a Zoom's update added a better button. Maxime's asked about the package manager. Hi, Maxime. I also owe you an email. The package manager right now is specifically for functions. So yes, it is a little bit more like a snippets manager, I suppose. But in the future, what we're hoping for, you can see in here, right now we've just given everyone all of them since they were in your autocomplete anyway, but you would have the ability to say install one of these. And so you would install the Slack package or the GCP package, and you would get the entire collection of things that go with it and then have them available rather than having every single package get added to everyone's autocomplete immediately. I know, for example, Git and Post are getting a little bit clunky with the number of things we've added there. Or same thing, like you could add Dark's implementation of the Stripe package, or one that we're going to work on soon is that Nihilist package to get better access to email data. And I think we'll keep expanding our GCP package as well. So back to this, with the scope for this one, I could write this in the same thing, but I'm not going to, since the whole point is to give you a little bit of content that you can actually read and work from. And so if I grab this one, that's not what I wanted, or at least that's not what I said I was going to do. I do need that one next. Grab my scope, just gonna make it read only so I can see my data coming back out of our bucket. And then same logic for my token, just gonna rewrite the same thing. And we can run the exact same thing again, see what happens. We get our token back again, and I have done this properly this time. Get that bucket, same bucket. actually, that'd be a good thing to show. So if I change my bucket here, say, to be dark demo bucket 2, and then I attempt to rerun this, I'm going to get back the error that my bucket is not found, which is one of the nice things about having this. And then if I run it again, no more bucket error. Got my bucket, and then my URL, which was the thing I tried to copy before, this one. And you can see in this one, to get something back out, we need to know the bucket name and what we're trying to get. And so we're going to have 2 of these concatenations for that. And then our object, and this is going to be file, and our file is going to be hello world. Okay, and then we don't need a body since we already have what we're getting. And then we can say what type we want to return. And in this case, we're going to return media because I want us to actually see the file we put in, not just the metadata, although we can do both. Get. I've already forgotten. Alt media. And our header, bear token. I think that's all we need. Let's give it a go. Oh, yay. The scariest thing about doing this live is you never know if it's actually going to work or something's going to go horribly wrong, which is sometimes the case. And there you go. We get back our content that we put in earlier, like 4 minutes ago, where we get hello from our Darkling GCP chat, and we get back the timestamp. So I'm going to pause there for a sec. That's really the core of the integration. You can see now we have things going into our bucket and coming out of our bucket. You can imagine that instead of me just building this in 2 REPLs, so we could just step through them manually, you could say have 2 API endpoints, one that puts things in the bucket and one that gets things out of the bucket. And I saw we had a few questions come in, so I'm going to go to that. Yes, I do believe I double encoded the dictionary. I'm sorry. Let me, if I take this out, I think everything will be fine. Take 2, and then we'll do hello world 2, and we'll post. And then we will do the same thing, and then we'll get this back out. Take 2. Yep. So that 2JSON is actually unnecessary for that dictionary. You're welcome to do it without it. I'll make sure the sample version that goes up reflects that. So that's the core of that. One other thing I will call out since we're here, and I know this comes up a fair amount for people, you can see that our I showed you a version of this failing. So like if I change my bucket back to bucket 2 and I get this failure, you can see that the error that comes back from the server goes to the error rail for me. And so this is really nice when I'm doing something like this demo where I just want it to work and I'm like, oh, I have a bug, I'm gonna go fix it. But when you get to the point where you're actually like, you might be posting things, I don't know where you'd post your bucket, it doesn't exist, but you might end up with a scenario where you're going to get back an error from the server. And if you want to be able to match specifically on that, this is where you would go through and you would take the errors off the error rail and use match to account for them. So let me just do that quickly. I'm going to take off rail. And you can see that once I've taken it off the rail, what I get instead of having error rail error, I just have an error looping around this. And so what I can do then is I can match on this result. And so I can match here. Fun trick about the pipelines, if you want to pipe a specific chunk and it isn't piping the thing you want it to, if you select it and then hit Shift Enter, it will pipe only that chunk. And I feel sad because I was just thinking that we'd fix most of the problems with the pipelines, which means inevitably they happen while I'm talking to all of you. And there we go. And so then we could have just response and then success or whatever we want. And then we could have error and response. It's the most boring logic handling ever. One thing, if you haven't been back to Dark in a while, that's kind of cool and new now is that traces will fade out if that portion of the code didn't run. So you can see in this case, since we were using our failed bucket, my just response is dimmed out and my error response is highlighted, so I can see where that goes. And if I go back to doing bucket 1 and then I run this, yes, I get back my okay, and my error here comes up for other people too. There are 2 special types in Dart in this regard. There are option types, which return just and nothing, which is frequently the results of your DB operations. And then there are result types, which return okay and error. This is why it is good to check things. And so then you can see once I switch to okay, I have the okay response here, and then everything works as I expect and my errors grayed out. A match will not throw an error if you're missing a case. A good pattern for what to do if you are missing a case is to add a catch-all case. And better occurring in pipes, we've actually been going back and forth on this. It's been a subject of some debate. We sometimes like the simplicity of only being able to pipe into the first parameter, which is how it is today. But then there are also times that you want to be able to pipe into not the first parameter. The personal frustration about piping location and pipe targets is that if you have a DB set, the reason you do val first is because we want you to be able to pipe into that field more than we want you to be able to pipe into string, the key field. But when you think about your like the object, the way that it works, it's actually like this, and so it's really weird that it's backwards. And from that perspective, it would be nice if you could pipe into more locations. Sorry for the slight digression. I've been thinking about this a lot this week. Cool. Any other questions about our GCP buckets? All right, then I will transition quickly, and I'm going to show 2 more things just to kind of give you a sense of how this works across other platforms as well, and how it might be similar for other services you would pull out from Google Cloud. Again, if you have something that doesn't come up today that you want to see come up, send us a note and we'll try to make sure it comes up next week. Or just ask a question today. So this is the equivalent for S3. You can see this is a publicly facing route for getting an S3 file. This one, I believe, returns the headers. And this was a combination of work done by a user of Dark, and then Dean and Julian on our team both worked on this as well. You can see why the package manager for GCP was important to us. This is a pain to go through and be able to do this. One thing I will give it is it's slightly less of a pain where you can check and make sure things are working every step of the way. So the live values are really helpful. But if you're looking for a AWS signing example like this to be in the package manager, send us a note. This one is not in the package manager yet, but I could see it being much more helpful to have that than copy pasting all of this information. I will note here, this one uses a bunch of the other crypto functions. I believe we've gotten a request recently for adding an MD5 function, which hasn't happened yet. But if you are blocked by that MD5 function, drop us a note too. You should be able to paste now. Paste was something we put a lot of work into making it better. There is still some weirdness around paste depending on how much you're trying to paste and what you're trying to paste, but we can try it. So this is, I've taken the entirety of the sample canvas and I'm going to try to put it into our LM May 15th canvas, and we're going to see what happens. Get, I guess I don't. Yep, there you go. Full paste completely works. I don't remember who actually fixed that, but it might have been Paul. Whoever fixed that, thank you very much. It has made both showing things, demoing things, using sample canvases, and my life personally much better. Cool. So then last one I will show you before opening up to chat about anything people would like is this is an example of using Dark with Firebase off. I know auth has been a common request, and we're going to be working on getting some auth packages into the package manager as well, in addition to some of the OAuth functions we've done for other things. But this is a case of using Firebase to allow user sign up. And you can see like there are two other things in this that you can't see on the screen, one of which is a verify and extract token function, and one of which is the user's key. But you can see here, it is a table of all their users. They put their certificates into a data store instead of having them in a function. We've heard a lot recently about secrets, and secrets is one of the things we're really taking a strong look at right now. It's very important to us, and it would make my life a lot easier for demoing too. And then you can see they have the ability to sign up, the ability to update a user, and the ability to see a user. I can give you a look at this function too. And once again, the big thing that ends up being a pain for a lot of these pieces is the auth piece. And so this verify and extract function relies on quite a few of the standard library functions to do that. And again, I think this is like one of the big reasons we end up spending a lot of time talking about how to connect to external services is some of these external services, and particularly the ones that we use as developers, the authentication process and the like actually getting to a point where you can use the somewhat easier APIs can be a big pain. And so we're working to make it a little bit easier to get over that so you can use them from within Dark.